I want to thank everybody for joining today. My name's Hall Martin. I'm the CEO of 10 Capital. We have a great lineup of presenters today, as well as breakout sessions for you to meet with each of these speakers at the end of the session. For those who are interested in learning more about 10 Capital, we'll stay in the main room in the second half to learn more about what we're doing there. With that, let's go ahead and let's introduce our panelists today. We have coming up with us the initial investors who will be on the panel. And first up will be Jose Luis, if he can come up and introduce yourself and tell us more about your fund there, Jose, and we'll then go to our second one.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you very much for the time. We are Dux Capital. Dux means leader in Latin. And we are a venture capital that invests in seed stages in Latino-led startups. This is our 8th year of operation. We are in our second fund, and we are very excited to deploy capital in the whole USA for underrepresented founders, which from Latinos to Latinos, that's our expertise. We always lead a round. We are a very active but non-invasive investor. We deploy an average of $1 million to startups that are changing this world and this country. We have a track record of our first fund that made 17 investments across different industries: robotics, AI, C2G, logistics, fintech, legal tech, etc. Our funds have always been institutional, and we play in the space of being a venture capital. Today, when a Latino wants to raise a round, we're on the top of their list, and we're very grateful for that. And that it's seen in our big pipeline that we do it all around the U.S. Myself, I used to be an investment banker previous to Dux, and when we started in 2016, we brought my experience with Daniel Santamarina's experience as a founder, and I think that those are the two variables that you need for a venture capital.
Great, thank you for that, and thank you for joining today. And we also have with us Jack Whelan of the International Accelerator. Jack, can you tell us more about yourself and your fund, and also how does your group work?
Well, to introduce myself, and I guess what I'll be talking about today, and also I'll say hello to Jose. Him and I just met about 2 days ago, thanks to an introduction from Hall and Shane. But I'm going to be talking about a little bit of an overview about what IA does, International Accelerator, as well as a very new fund that we're about to launch called IA Global Ventures. So to start with a little bit of background on myself, I'm the Director of Business Development for International Accelerator. So primary responsibilities for me are going to be bringing in new companies into the accelerator, working within those existing portfolio companies to help drive revenue growth, do whatever I can to help them on a business development front. Touch on that a little bit more in a second. And then fundraising on both our behalf, obviously launching a fund, we're doing some fundraising, and on behalf of our founders. From an education standpoint, studied industrial distribution at Texas A&M for undergrad, worked for a few years before coming back to UT to complete my MBA. So a bit of a turncoat there, but work-wise, the majority of my career has always been in direct sales, covering a couple different products and markets, ranging from oil and gas equipment to building materials to IT and cybersecurity services and software. But today I'll be giving a brief overview of both International Accelerator. I'll touch the services that we offer, our program structure, highlight a few of our portfolio companies that you may know, and then talk about the more traditional venture fund, IA Global Ventures, and the interplay between the two organizations, especially with a focus on how we do due diligence for international deals. Lastly, I'll kind of drill into some of the specific considerations we look at specifically on the accelerator side as well as the fund side, some of the pros and cons of both of the models, and then I'll turn it over to some of the exciting companies that we have presenting today. So at a very high-level overview, International Accelerator is a 12-month on-site acceleration program based here in Austin, Texas, and we are offered exclusively to foreign-born founders, which is both a testament to our experiences as a team, as well as our belief in the talent potential available when drawing on a diverse pool of founders, which really starts with our own founder, Angelos Angelou, who came to the U.S. from Greece in his late teens, landed in South Dakota, if you can imagine the antithesis of Greece, and had to navigate all the challenges of both having a career in banking before joining the Austin Chamber of Commerce and then launching Angelos Economics, our sister company, about 30 years ago. So our company is born out of the belief of, we need to do something to give back, help other founders have an easier go of it than at least Angelos did. Some very high-level statistics shown here about our portfolio, at least within the accelerator. This is a little bit out of date, so we actually have about 45 startups that are either active or have graduated from the portfolio so far. So we need to update these numbers. But to touch in on a little bit more detail to some of the services that we offer to our portfolio companies, I like to separate things into tangible and intangible services. So on the tangible side, visa support. We need to get our founders here, and we can actually guarantee that all of our founders will successfully receive an O1 visa and have had a 100% success rate in achieving that. From a corporate legal support standpoint, we do have agreements with several attorneys and law firms that will do deferred payment for our founders, meaning they will not incur any invoices unless and until they're able to raise about, or at least $200K in their next fundraising round. Typically, all we're going to see there is the formation of their Delaware C Corp. Occasionally, we'll see SEC registration come up for fintechs. Knock on wood, we've had no other major legal issues. Also offer housing to our founders for the duration of the program, typically starting with 3 months actually at Angelos's house, so that the founders can tap into his network from Angelos Economics, his time with the Chamber of Commerce, which can be very valuable for finding both clients as well as investors. And then office space and IT credits in the form of AWS and Google Cloud credits. Then kind of getting into the intangible services, it would be business development consulting, which is my part, with a very high-level overview of sales process design, sales and marketing, collateral consultation, legal document review, and then also execution and operations support. I always say to people, I'm not too proud to pick up the phone and make cold calls on behalf of our founders, and often do. Then marketing consulting, so helping our founders with their go-to-market strategies here in the US and how that might differ from their home country, drawing up a business model canvas, developing branding, PR strategies, you name it within marketing. And then the third component would be financial and operational consulting, which our CFO does. So very involved with the structuring of companies, setting up IP licensing agreements, building financial models, running the accounting. And I think more than any of us, he's more active in the negotiations with investors when we do get to the Series A fundraising round, which is really fundraising assistance. I think to a lot of our founders is definitely the big goal, right, is for us to help them with fundraising. That happens in two ways. One will be an investment through Angelou Investing LLC, where we will invest up to 125K in each portfolio company. But then we use that to go out and market to our previous investors, people we've just met recently, you name it. And on average, we've been able to raise about 2.2 million for each of our portfolio companies. To touch just real quickly on some case studies of companies that have come out of IA, starting with Scoops, which is really the inception of IA, was Angelos was an advisor to Scoops, ultimately wound up investing, and they were kind of the impetus for us to formalize the accelerator program and scale it. But it's an ed tech platform similar to like a Canvas. It's a tool for hosting training programs and your training materials. They've had a ton of traction, particularly with the Department of Defense. Latest valuation of 250 million in 2022. Another one, Restream, that some of you may be familiar with, multi-streaming platform founded in Ukraine. Recently moved all of their employees, about 200 employees, to Lisbon, Portugal. Latest valuation of about 176 million. And then the last would be PickTime, which is a Calendly competitor, to just use a more household name. But they've got about 400,000 active users, customers like IKEA on the corporate side. Latest valuation of about 15 million. To walk through kind of how our process works on both the accelerator side as well as introduce IA Global Ventures, the fund side. In a typical year, we see right around 7,000 applications Of those applications, only 12 get past our due diligence process and are admitted into the program. We're leveraging things like inbound applications that just come from our website, referrals from our network of country advisors, and participation in global entrepreneurial events like South by Southwest, pitch competitions, this event today, of course. And IA Global Ventures really has a distinct advantage of being down process, if you will, or downstream from IA's already rigorous due diligence process. So they're kind of getting the cream of the crop and then have their option to choose out of those 12 companies which they're going to back. To talk about our due diligence process here, both on the fund side as well as on the accelerator side, I don't think I'll be shocking anyone with my graphic here that we are, of course, looking at things like product, market size, founder's background and personality, financial standing of the companies. But when we're conducting due diligence, IAGV does have that advantage of being able to work alongside these founders because they're in the IA portfolio over the course of 6 to 12 months. So they got a really rigorous hands-on, working with these companies, helping them scale, living with them even, and really getting to know the founders on a personal level. So we get, really granular on due diligence on the fund side compared to a lot of other traditional venture funds might spend, over Zoom meetings, you name it, maybe 20 hours before deciding to commit capital into an investment, where we have, the luxury of having that 6 to 12 months. Again, here talking on our deal flow and how that kind of results in outsized returns. I'll touch again on the extremely privileged due diligence process that we have. Once IAGV is looking at companies, they've already been diligenced by International Accelerator. We have personal relationships with the founders, so we get typically more attractive deal terms. That all comes together for us to be able to provide outsized returns because we get such a long time to look at these companies before we do decide to move forward with them. Then my last little slide here, I wanted to talk about our deal evaluation process. Obviously, I'm recycling my former graphic here. Of course, we're looking at product, market size, founder profiles, financial positions, but also talking about some of the things that we're looking at both from an international standpoint as well as an accelerator, because we have 12 companies per year coming in. There's often room for synergies within existing portfolio companies where adding one might help another. The founders might be bringing a very strong network in their home country, whether that's investors, clients, you name it. And also oftentimes they're de-risked by having the stability of existing cash flows in whichever country they're coming from in order to kind of keep them afloat, provide cash flows, you name it. Some of the cons that we definitely see, our due diligence process on the accelerator side is definitely done at arm's length, mostly over Zoom or Google Meets. So we have limited in-person interactions with the founders, and oftentimes the first time we're seeing them in person or shaking their hand is in the arrivals lane at Austin Bergstrom Airport as we're picking them up to bring them back to our housing and basically welcome them into our office. So wanted to share definitely some times where, we have been burned in the past, of course. We've also had very positive surprises. To give you an example of maybe a negative example, we have had very early stage companies that come to us and we find out their MVP doesn't exist at all, and they still need months of development work before we can really focus on commercialization. In a similar vein, we've also had people that didn't really have much of a company at all. We get them a visa, all of a sudden they stop showing up at the office. So yes, we've definitely been burned in the past, but we're sharpening our due diligence process with every iteration of it to kind of protect ourselves from that. But to highlight some very positive examples, one very recent example was a recent portfolio company who joined. This never came up in the due diligence process. I don't know how, but after joining and meeting some of the other portfolio companies, he let us know, hey, I run a 50-person software development shop back in India. I'd be more than happy to do any development work for any of the other portfolio companies, either for free or at cost, depending on the scope. So obviously that's a huge value to an early stage company to have access to that. And another good example would be one of our portfolio companies in Flupercy has a database or a network, I should say, of 90,000 plus influencer marketers all over the world. So they've been very active with other portfolio companies, helping them build that brand presence and brand awareness as they launch their businesses and launch their products. So hopefully I kept to my time there. Here's my contact information. If anyone is interested in reaching out to learn more about either entity, IA or IAGV, feel free to grab a screen grab. I'll also drop my contact information into the chat here so everybody can copy and paste it. But Hall, thank you so much. And I will turn it back over to our pitchers today. And I believe starting with Rejuvenation Technologies.
Great. Thanks, Jack, for that great presentation. At this point, let's move over to Rejuvenation Technologies. We have with us John Ramunas. John, if you can join us up here on the stage, we'd like to have you tell us more about what you're doing there at Rejuvenation Technologies.
I want to give you a quick overview of where we're at and why I think this could really be a great fit. I'm going to go through as fast as I possibly can, so I'm going to gloss over a lot, but I'm happy to go through it together with you on a call in more detail. The top line takeaway is that we've developed a platform to turn back the molecular aging clock of cells by reversing telomere shortening. This is why we've already attracted heavy hitter investors like Y Combinator and Khosla Ventures. Disclaimers. At a very high level, we're extending telomeres, which are the ends of chromosomes that naturally shorten over time as we age. And as they shorten, cell function breaks down. And the downstream molecular problems that result cause age-related disease with manifestations that are specific to each tissue and organ. The short version is that this is a fact of life. It's a major transition we go through when our telomeres are at the critical threshold of shortness, which prevents them from forming a loop at the end. And this is a major cause of most of the medical burden in society, the age-related chronic disease treatments. We've developed a platform to increase regenerative capacity of cells by reversing a decade of telomere shortening with a single dose of messenger RNA. The messenger RNA encodes the protein telomerase, which has been evolved over millions of years by nature to extend telomeres, so it's very specific and very efficient. Our goal is to bring patients into the Goldilocks zone for telomere length. Our approach is to boost telomerase activity transiently as stem cells do, resulting in a dose-dependent telomere extension. In contrast, cancers have telomerase turned on permanently, and that causes them to be immortalized. We've targeted clinical indications with the strongest evidence for telomere shortening as the root mechanism, that also have very high unmet medical need and for which delivery of messenger RNA to the target stem cells is feasible, including through an invention at our company. So far, we've seen tremendous success in both our pulmonary and hepatic programs, and our upcoming milestones for our lead assets are scale-up of manufacturing and preclinical toxicology. Our lead indication, which is idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, or IPF, is eligible for orphan designation. The third area we're working on is a drug for the immune system. Like the liver and lung programs, we anticipate that we'll be able to target a number of high-value clinical indications. We're building a platform, and with every new indication and drug product, we rapidly grow our IP around all aspects, including the mRNA, and the manufacturing, and the delivery technologies. Our goal is to de-risk the platform and ultimately have a single treatment, a combination cocktail that can extend telomeres throughout the body. At that point, we can holistically extend a person's health span by mitigating, preventing chronic age-related disease. And it's this vision and demonstrated capability in a subset of the organs that already has us engaged with major pharmaceutical companies. They're excited about our approach, and they're eager to see our progress moving forward. We're building a team of seasoned veterans in all the necessary areas: R&D, translation, and clinical development. This includes Dan Chambers, for example, who just joined us as Chief Medical Officer. Dan is a clinical champion of telomere extension to treat IPF. In fact, he's already running a clinical trial to do that. Unfortunately, he's using a drug which he readily acknowledges is not a good drug. It's an androgen which has liver toxicity and masculinizing effects and doesn't actually extend telomeres much at all. Nonetheless, it's such an important mechanism to address that he's going ahead with it. And he says his patients embrace this because the existing drugs to treat IPF are Me Too drugs, yet another antifibrotic. It's very well known that intervening in that pathway, the fibrotic downstream pathway, confers a little bit of benefit, but doesn't get to the root problem, which is the failure of the stem cells of the lung to be able to divide, to repair and regenerate the lung. We're planning to do our first trials in Australia, where Dan Chambers is based, where he runs one of the largest IPF clinical trial networks of hospitals in the world. And we're also supported by a world-renowned advisory board of folks with really deep expertise in their respective verticals. This includes manufacturing, regulatory, and the fundamental biomarkers that will be able to enable us to demonstrate that we're achieving the pharmacological effect in the phase 1 safety trial that will enable us to raise the funds to do the phase 2 trial. Right now, we're focusing on getting our lung asset through phase 1 of the clinic. And to that end, we're going to be raising a Series A 20 million. We've raised over 10 million to date, and we currently have a seed extension round running. It's a 2.5 million total round. We've raised over 2 million on it, and use of funds is shown here. We've also just in the last couple of months received 2 different grants totaling 6.5 million, one from California Institute of Regenerative Medicine and one from the National Institutes of Health to forward our lung and liver programs respectively. We also have several existing investors who are eager to follow on in our A, and these investors are strategic. We are very fortunate to be in the Silicon Valley area, where Stanford, where all 3 of the co-founders, including myself, invented the drug and filed the patent and licensed it. It's very supportive. We continue to use their core facilities to reduce our costs, increase our efficiencies and capabilities. And the hiring environment around here is second to none. So I know this is a pretty short presentation and there's a lot in it. And I'd love to set up a time to chat more with you guys. I'm looking forward to doing so. Thank you.
Great. For those in the audience, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. For those on the panel, let's start with Jose. Jose, what questions did you have for John?
Yeah, John, I mean, in terms of timing, and as you know, and you have already VCs in your cap table or as investors, how do you see the lifespan of the venture capital path? Starting to sell and all the way to exit, because as you know, funds in general have a 8 to 10 year span. How do you match the span of that journey with the objective of a VC?
Yeah, our exit strategy is around phase 1, which will be late 2025, early 2026, to look for opportunities. If the IPO environment is favorable at that time, of course, we'd consider pursuing that. We also have very strong interest from Boehringer, for example, which is the pharma company which sells one of the only 2 approved drugs on the market to treat IPF at the moment. So acquisition of our pulmonary program could also be very a good exit at that time. Regarding the long-term participation of VC, as I mentioned, this is a platform with many potential indications, and I think we'd really love to bring on a VC which can get us first through our phase 1 of our first indication, and then hopefully follow on to support the liver and the immune drug products, et cetera, to expand the potential market ultimately.
Great. And Jack, what's your first question?
Yeah, kind of a broad question, but it seems like the applications for this would be limitless. And you even mentioned a cocktail that could kind of heal the whole body in once. First part would be, how far away do you think you are from creating that cocktail? Is that a 20-year thing, a 10-year thing, a 5-year thing? And then I'd also be really curious on how you target treatments to develop. Is it just based on the market size of the underlying diseases? Or, you tell me, just the next logical thing to jump to for whatever reason.
Yeah. The timeline for the whole body, we think is short. I think we're on the cusp of it. And specifically because it's now possible to deliver messenger RNA to the stem cells of the immune system. And the immune system failure due to short telomeres is one of the reasons that cancer incidence and infectious disease incidence and failure to respond to vaccines kill elderly individuals. So we think that by extending the telomeres in the hematopoietic progenitor cell compartment, as is now possible, we are on the cusp of introducing our first systemically valuable drug product. Regarding our criteria for triaging and prioritizing indications, delivery of messenger RNA has been the bottleneck for the last decade since the modified nucleotides were invented at UPenn, which enabled therapeutic mRNA to be viable as a modality. These delivery challenges have been falling one by one, including in the company. Here we invented what we think is the best method to deliver messenger RNA to the lung stem cells, and that's what our drug product uses. And the immune system is another example. It just fell in the last 18 months, year and a half. It was finally demonstrated in 2 different top labs that it's possible to do that. And we think we found a way to thread the IP needle to generate our own version of that, to extend the telomeres in the hematopoietic progenitor cell population for the immune system. We have a list of over 50 indications in which short telomeres are either causal or exacerbating. And we prioritize them first based on, can we treat the stem cells in the affected tissue type? Second, what is the market size? Third is, what is the regulatory pathway, the tractability clinically? Is there a biomarker which can be measured in phase 1, which will give us proof of biological activity? And then beyond that, it's been a question of serendipitous associations with people who are really expert. At Stanford, we were very fortunate to be able to collaborate with multiple clinician scientists to test out the drug in cells, not necessarily in animals, because the delivery capability was there. And time after time, it worked. So we're very optimistic that as the delivery capabilities continue to expand to different organs, we'll be able to continue to expand into additional indications.
Fantastic. Thank you.
John, my question is, I've understood that longevity therapies impact all other therapies, oncology, neurology, everything. Which other non-aging area do you think your technology will have its most impact on? Would it be neurology or oncology, or would it be something else?
Yeah, I would say that the gene editing field is probably like monogenic diseases in which it's now possible to correct the mutation and thereby cure the disease is probably low-hanging fruit. Not to say that neurology and others aren't also extremely promising. I focus on the CRISPR field because unlike Alzheimer's, for example, where the therapies in development and on the market now are still not very effective. The CRISPR field is just curing disease, like sickle cell anemia now cured. As long as you can get the treatment to people, you can take out their blood cells, correct the mutation, and then put them back in. The way that we can help is that in these patients, unfortunately, the telomeres are very short in the compartment affected by the mutation, because the damage caused by the mutation causes the stem cells of that tissue type to need to divide more times than they do in a normal, unaffected, healthy person. So even if you correct the mutation with CRISPR, the telomeres are still really short, doing the person to telomere-based failure of that tissue type. For example, in sickle cell patients, their immune system has very short telomeres. So we can basically stand on the shoulders of the CRISPR giants and companies by bringing together a combination therapy which simultaneously fixes a mutation and restores the ability of those corrected cells to divide as many times as a normal person's cells would divide as well.
Great. And Jose, did you have a second question?
Actually not. I'm very clear.
Okay, great. My last question for you, John, is about valuations. How do you look at your valuation compared to others in the space?
Yeah, so our evaluation currently is based on the investment in our most recent round. We've raised $2 million at a $48 million cap on SAFEs with a 20% discount. And in the space, there's a huge range of valuations. You guys have probably heard of several of the companies that the high end, Calico, Altos, these, founded by extremely deep pocketed entities to basically tackle all of aging. That's one extreme. And then in the middle are companies such as ourselves and some others where they've actually got something that seems to be working a little bit, at least in some cases. In our case, we think a lot. And so it justifies a valuation you might see in a very promising oncology drug product at preclinical stage. And then there are over 300 anti-aging companies on a database at the website agingbiotech.info if you're interested. Agingbiotech.info, just two words together, no hyphen or anything. In that database, the vast majority of the companies are pursuing earlier stage investigation of potential interventions in fundamental aging processes. And in those cases, valuations are on the order of lower, I'd say. So we distinguish ourselves from the pack of those 300 other anti-aging companies by having a drug product that's ready for the clinic and that addresses a fundamental mechanism of aging, probably the fundamental mechanism in a way which is highly specific and efficient. It's head and shoulders above. That's our view.
Great. Well, thanks so much, John, for a great presentation. We'll capture interest and let you know who to connect with afterwards. Thank you guys for great questions, Jack and John. Jose, let's move to our next presenter now. We have up next Windmill, Sam Lang. If you guys could jump up on the stage here and launch your slides, we'll kick off with the next one here in a moment.
Great. Thank you, everybody. My name's Sam Liang. I'm here along with Bill James and Jeff Goheen from the Windmill team, and we're pleased to present on behalf of Dr. Richard Smalling, who's the CEO of Windmill. And Windmill's developing a transformational LVAD, left ventricular assist device for end-stage heart failure patients. So as you talk about the disease state, there's over 5 million individuals with heart failure in the US at a tremendous cost of over $30 billion to the healthcare system. There's a subset of those patients, about 50,000 of them, that have end-stage heart failure that are seeking either heart transplants or a device called an LVAD. Unfortunately, due to the lack of hearts and deficiencies in the current LVAD technology, less than 9% of all patients get an LVAD, leaving well over 40,000 patients with a poor quality of life. And the way that LVAD technology works is it plugs into the left ventricle of the heart and pumps blood into the aorta, and is really the life-sustaining device for many of these patients. The reason why LVADs have a limited adoption today is that the only product that is on the market, it's a one-product market, it's a $1.1 billion market currently today that's reimbursed, is the Abbott HeartMate 3 technology. And it's based upon what is called a continuous flow pump. So think of a blender that's rotating at 3,000 to 5,000 RPMs at one constant turns to pull blood throughout the system. Unfortunately, these pumps damage the blood, and it results in about 1/3 of all patients receiving them having a high rate of adverse events, and well over 90% of these patients have to go back into the hospital. The solution that Windmill has developed is called TORVAD. So we've talked about the end-stage heart failure patient, and it's important to recognize that the LVAD is pulling blood out into the aorta and going into the aorta. The issue with, as I talked about, continuous flow pumps is that these rotate at a constant 3,000 to 5,000 RPMs. These damage the blood, and these result in a high incidence of patient adverse events as well as a rehospitalization rate of over 93%. The technology that Windmill has developed is called TORVAD, and essentially it simulates the human heart. It's two ceramic pistons that are enclosed in a titanium case that pump in a pulsatile fashion in synchrony with the patient's activity. So there's AI algorithms that sense the heart rate, pressure, and other factors that either speed up or slow down the rate of the pump. So if the patient's walking very, very fast, the patient speeds up, the pump speeds up. And if the patient's sitting down, it slows down, just like your human heart does today. It's very gentle and does not damage the blood. Because of that, it requires a lot less power because it's not pumping constantly as a continuous flow pump does. And as a result of that, it's 1/3 the size and 1/3 the weight of the Curvett Abbott HeartMate 3, which will make it much more patient friendly. And the end result and value proposition is because it does not damage the blood, there should be a reduction in adverse events, in GI bleeding and stroke, and there will be improved patient and physician adoption. Just to demonstrate how gentle it is, we asked the engineers to actually put raisins through the system, and to show that it doesn't chew up the raisins. They said, well, we can do something better. And they actually put a goldfish, a guppy, through it without damaging multiple times. With the money that the company has raised to date, they have gone through and made tremendous progress. There's been 3 generations of products that have been designed. They have filed multiple patents. They've done multiple animals, over 50 animals and cadavers, as well as shown functional testing of the device out through 40 years. It's been presented at multiple global conferences and has contracts ready to execute with extremely qualified vendors that have LVAD experience. And as a result of actually all of the work, just last year, the company won the ACC, American College of Cardiology, and NIH Innovation Pitch Challenge. It was recognized as the most innovative technology. The key takeaway from this slide, there's been quite a bit of a KOL support. And I would say the key takeaway for this is that many of the KOLs said that this would become their frontline therapy over HeartMate 3 if this device were able to get to the market. From a market perspective, the current market today is actually a reimbursed $1.1 billion globally, 600 million of it in the US. The TAM actually is about 6.4 billion, but as I spoke to earlier, due to the lack of hearts and due to the shortfalls in the current devices available, there's a very low penetration rate. TORVAD, once it hits the market, can actually replace HeartMate 3, become the frontline therapy, and it actually expand use to what we would project to a much larger product utilization over in the future. What the company is currently doing today, it is raising $7 million. It is to hire an experienced CEO. Dr. Richard Smalling, who's not here today, is a full-time practicing cardiologist. He's doing cases today, seeing patients, and we need to get someone in who can get this taking from bench to the bedside. We have engaged 2 very qualified regulatory consultants at MICRA and Valentium. As I mentioned, MICRA has the former FDA official who approved LVAD devices, and he is working with us to advise us on the clinical regulatory path. And Valentium has electromechanical implantable experience. And the use of funds is to finalize the product design, the pump controller, the peripherals, and to develop the first-in-human protocols. All of the exits that have been in this specific marketplace have been in the billions of dollars. And there's a number of companies that have call points and commercial organizations in this that have indicated interest once the company can demonstrate first-in-human data and collect first-in-human data. There's a very experienced team that's backing the company. And with that, I'd like to maybe conclude the presentation, and I thank everybody for them. We'll look forward to answering any questions from the panel and or the participants. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sam. Jack, what's your first question?
So I was actually telling Hall last Thursday how much I liked the design of this pump. It reminds me almost of like a Wankel rotary engine, excuse me. But
Yeah.
Why go with a brand new design compared to, say, like a peristaltic pump? Has a lot of applications in medicine, but what were the limitations of like a peristaltic pump compared to coming up with this brand new design? And then also, second part of my question, if you could expand on some of the damage that the centrifugal continuous motion pumps are doing to the blood. I saw red blood cell degradation, but I missed some of the other points.
Yeah. So a couple things, and I don't know if you can admit Jeff Goheen. He can give a little bit of the history. He's the director of engineering. He'll come along and give the history of all of the background around it. Just to address the second part of your question, there have been quite a number of benchtop testing that has been done by Carlos Bartoli, who's one of the thought leaders in the field of LVADs, mechanical circulatory support system. And you can see in all of the various testings, there's been significant p-value of difference in terms of reduction of damage in the von Willebrand fragments on all of the various hemolysis that has occurred. So it's been definitely demonstrated on multiple levels as an end result of the gentle pump. Jeff, if I could maybe get you to comment on the why with this design versus a peristaltic pump versus a continuous flow pump, which we know today, has the specific poor outcomes.
So the old they went with the continuous flow pumps, the impeller pumps, because they were durable. They could last a long time. They wanted to do pulsatile pumps originally, so they had sac-like pumps that had valves in them, or peristaltic pumps, like you say, are used on the bedside. But they always had problems with durability with those pulsatile pumps. And so this, we're using ceramics, and the way that the pump operates, it's a very durable pump. It'll last for 40 to 400 years before failing. So this was the way that we figured out to make a durable pulsatile device, whereas the other pulsatile ones can't be durable. They can't last inside a patient for 10 plus years.
Right, the polymer will break down and fail. Fantastic. Thank you.
Yep.
Great. Jose, what's your question?
I have several, but in terms of production and manufacturing, I bet you rely on different suppliers. Are you covering those risks in terms of if you go to mass production? How are you going to rely on these suppliers, and where are they? Right.
Sure. Yeah. So from an overall production perspective, we have, and I'm just pulling up this slide here. We have did a very broad search of all qualified potential contract manufacturers. And, you can do a build or buy type of strategy. We decided to buy the strategy to be the quickest to get to market. We've identified this company called Valentium that's based down in Houston. So we're based in Austin, Texas. So they're right down the road from us. Valentium actually has a number of engineers that have worked in the LVAD space prior. And more importantly, today, they actually are a contract developer for many folks that are in the implantable electromechanical space, mostly neuromodulation, which are also very complex devices. So think about, products, the former Cyberonics, LivaNova products, so they're implantable titanium cans welded with a lead that would go into a specific part of the body. So they have very specific, they already have all the technology where they could make and develop device for first in human. And at that point in time, Jose, we have the ability to either contract with them, they can scale up to manufacture these devices, or we can begin to develop our own development process in line, in-house. You're not talking about tens of thousands of devices. We're really talking about 4,000, mostly maybe up to 7 or 8, maybe 10,000 devices at the most. We're not talking about making hundreds of thousands of these devices. So the space itself is not one that you need a lot of to do.
Right. And do you think that production will take you to an exit strategy in which you will return everything to our investors? That's the second one. And last,
Yep.
Tide, how much of on a fully diluted basis, how much of the company is still owned by the co-founders?
Yeah, so from a financial perspective, and I'm just kind of going through, sorry about the flipping, I'm just going through to the timeline here to answer your specific questions, your first question in terms of overall funding and potential exits. So we're raising $7 million here that'll take the company through to the end of 2025, early 2026 timeframe, and it'll take another 13 million to get to first in human. At the time of the first in human is when many of the strategics have indicated they would be willing to discuss, a potential structured exit, something that's very common that occurs in the biotech field, number one, and or number two, they would come in and syndicate and fund the US pivotal study or trial. So we're looking at the first, inflection point would be the conclusion of the first in human study around the 2027 timeframe, where there could be a liquidation event in terms of strategics, and or to the earlier presentation, we would certainly have a story to go IPO. As you're talking about the actual funding, there's about 14 million has been raised to date. 8 million of that was non-dilutive capital. It was all original NIH grants and a grant from one other specific strategics. Of the 6 million of actual equity that exists, it's still primarily the original investors from a cap table perspective. Right now, the last valuation, as I showed, I think in an earlier slide, we're looking at about $19 million. So you can do the math, 6 over 19 is the original ownership.
Very clear, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sam. Great presentation. We're at the end of the time now. Appreciate that. And let's go ahead and bring up our next presenter. We have with us now Chris Casper of Techless. Chris, if you could join us here on the stage now.
All right. Hey, everyone. Great to meet you. My name is Chris Casper, and I'm the founder of Techless. Let's dive in. We create healthy technology. We're on a path and believe in the next 10 years, we can give the world back 100 billion life hours. These are hours that would have been squandered on screen time. People sitting there watching, cat videos, makeup tutorial, things that actually don't really enrich our lives in a meaningful way. Currently, there's an issue. I had a foster kids around a few years ago, and 10 and 13-year-old girls, and they were dropped off at our house, and the caseworker said, hey, don't let these girls near anything that looks like a smartphone. It will, they'll send weird pictures of themselves to older men. It was just a really tricky situation. And so that was kind of the inspiration for asking these questions, and realized quickly that it wasn't just kids that were dealing with issues around screen time, with addiction to our phones, things like that. It was actually a broader group of the United States. There was a Deloitte study last year. 164 million people are trying to cut back from their smartphone usage. Most of them are failing. Again, back to kids, there's just an overwhelming evidence that this stuff is killing us. Literally, teen suicide rates are up 4x, direct correlation with the digitization, the internetization of our younger generations here. Most teens can't cut back, and pretty much universally, all parents are worried about what's going on right now on devices. We did a survey of around 2,500 parents. 96% of them said they were worried about inappropriate content. So we have to ask ourselves this question: how come Google or Apple doesn't just snap their fingers and solve this? It seems like there could be some pretty quick and easy solutions coming from the big tech sector. And the truth is that they built themselves upon the attention economy. These are the revenues, I'm talking billions of dollars, from Apple and Google, their app stores alone, not hardware sales, not software, just this is the app store alone. This is the money that they get from the attention economy. And so it would be illegal or fiduciarily irresponsible to shareholders at best to change their model in a way that actually isn't built on eyeballs to a screen. And so the truth is, these companies right now are paying a tax. They're losing consumer trust. If you look statistically, Apple and Google are both below 50% user trust, and those trends are declining more and more. So we had to ask ourselves, how do we start from a totally different business model, a totally different perspective? And so we created our first product, our flagship product. We call it Wise Phone. It's a pure and simple phone. I use it. It's very basic. It calls, texts, a few basic tools, clock, maps, calculator. But what's more important and what people actually pay a premium for are the boundaries on the device. What's not on the device? There's no social media, no access to pornography, nothing you can get addicted to or distracted by. It's safe for kids out of the box, but about 80% of our sales are actually to adults right now. Wise Phone isn't just, although it looks very simple on the outside, it isn't just a simple old phone. We actually spent a lot of time to where we could own the infrastructure behind what's driving it. So there's no Apple and there's no Google looking at data or insights of what's going on. We own the platform, we own the app distribution platform, we own the code, we own the apps. It's an extremely technically complex behind the scenes process here. We've built 9 apps from the ground up. And then something called the Family Portal. It's a back end where users can see every call, message history, location history, and there's a lot of opportunity for AI to serve the users instead of serve the company that we can monetize on. We just conducted a really intensive qualitative research study with our existing users. We dove in and did an 1.5 hour+ interview with over 30 users. And consistently, the trends were just universal. People bought it because they liked Wise Phone's simplicity. They liked how it looked. They liked what it wasn't. We built the whole phone with 2 colors, 2 fonts. I mean, this is crazy to build a phone UX UI with one of the top UX UI designers in the world with such a simple palette, and they loved it. But what I'm excited about is that we're actually accomplishing that goal that we set out before us, and we're actually transforming lives. Everybody felt consistently more present, more focused, less anxious. They just felt peace. And that was just the consequences of distractions not sitting there in their pockets constantly. If you look across the board, we just have hundreds of user reviews, thousands of user reviews actually, that are just extremely positive and the transformative power of Wise Phone. And that translates into dollars for investors. But I think one of the things I'm excited about is the top right one. Specifically in our category of minimalist phones, these are phones that do not do a lot. We have risen as best in class, meaning there's a handful of other minimalist phones out there, but ours by far is the easiest to use. It's the best to use. It's the simplest. It just works. And there's a lot of bugs and glitches and hardware issues and stuff with others. So I'm pretty proud of our customer service. We have over 3,800 email and chat interactions. We've got a 99.97% satisfaction rate. This is unheard of. And this really pays off when it comes to people's perceptions of our brand. I think one of the greatest predictors of short-term success is revenue, profitability, these type of things. But you can manipulate those numbers for a quarter or for a year even possibly. But I think the stickier, more difficult thing to do that's a predictor of long-term success. Here's how successful a company will be over the next 5 years is Net Promoter Score. This is the strength of the brand. And right now we're scoring a 61. This scale goes from -100 to +100. And this is better than Chick-fil-A, Google, Target, on par with Apple. This is a really, really strong brand that people love what we're dishing out and talking about. We've been super lean as far as Silicon Valley terms. A lot of companies that have raised the same amount of money we have are still pre-revenue. We brought in $2 million in revenue on just $2.5 million invested. We've sold thousands of phones. We consider the phones we've sold so far our beta MVP sellable products. We do not consider them the final iteration of what we're hoping to bring to market, but we've used them to learn and to really get ready for this next chapter. So just to give you context, we launched with Wise Phone. This is a minimalist phone. We have a Motorola logo on it. We're selling direct to consumer. There were some limitations, manufacturing lifespan, such like this. What I'm super excited about is based on everything we've learned, we are working on and launching before the end of the year, Wise Phone 2. This is a healthy phone. It does more. It's more robust. Those things when you're asking yourself, oh, I like Wise Phone, but I need my blank. Fill in that blank. We have a healthy version of it likely, and we can put it on this device. And it kind of bridges the gap between a minimalist phone and a fully fledged smartphone and defines what healthy is. This is philosophically a huge breakthrough. There's nothing like it categorically right now. And from our perspective, we have a lot more control over this, and the hardware is amazing. We really like where we're going with Wise Phone 2. Not going to get too detailed into the numbers, but I think the biggest thing to recognize is that Wise Phone 2, we were already doing 58% margins on Wise Phone 1. Amazing, especially when you're talking hardware sales. But we're quadrupling our profit over the lifetime value in the new model that we've set forth with Wise Phone 2. Quick glance at the market. Again, other minimalist phones, we've risen to the surface as being best in category. People think they can lock down smartphones, but I think that perception is slowly eroding. There's a lot of Gen Zers right now buying flip phones because they realize how toxic smartphones are and that all the little things you can try, night shift mode and all these things, aren't quite working the way that we'd like for them to work. Kids phones, kids don't like kids phones. You ask a kid, hey, do you want this phone for kids? And they say no. So we are an adult device, which is actually means it's perfect for kids. Not many people actually want to pay a premium for the $1,000 hacker phones out there. And flip phones are really just a pain to use. So we really are best in category in this new group. As far as who you're looking at leading, there's really me and John Mesh. In the past, I had an ad agency prior to this. I did marketing, I did national film work that won national Addies. I got on ESPN Super Bowl game day for some stuff I had done. And previously, I'd been part of a company that had crossed $1 billion within 5 years of launching, and I was the lead marketing and branding for them. Jonathan has great experience at Google. He was a product manager there, and he also launched a product with Google with a very small team. We're talking less than 5 folks that brought in $1 billion in revenue for Google the very first year it launched. So we both have $1 billion under our belts as far as things we've directly contributed to, and we have a great working relationship. We've been validated across the industry, whether it's been PR or different awards as far as other investors that have invested in us, and made some really strong splashes in the faith-based investment spaces. And then last but not least, fundraising. The good news is that we're closing our round. We have raised, again, a little over $2.5 million so far. What you're looking at right now is the bridge round. We are closing this as we speak. We have around 200K available. We have interest that exceeds that, but if you're interested, reach out to me. And the reason we're closing the round a little bit sooner than expected is that I have a $5 million draft term sheet for our next round. So this is kind of the last window of where this money even matters as far as negotiations for this term sheet. We've met with them 4 times already. The lead is secured. We're excited about the next partnership, but we have a little bit more room left in this round before it's closed. So reach out if you have any questions, and we would love to have you invest in Techless. Thank you so much. Happy to answer the questions.
Great. Those in the audience, please put them in the chat box. And Jose, what's your first question?
So in terms of procrastination, I really like what I'm seeing because it is a problem and the flow goes around that. But in terms of productivity and being myself more competent in my life, how are you going to cope with that? For example, I saw that probably you use Midjourney to create some of these images. Yep. So if I have Midjourney in my phone and I need to create a fast image, I just use my phone and it's the best tool ever in my hand. Or if I want to, I'm Mexican and I don't write 100% in English. So if I use ChatGPT to send a perfect letter at that moment in my cell phone, how are you going to cope with people being less competitive with your phone?
Yeah, so there's this continuum between a high productivity device and a low productivity device. And we're constantly asking ourselves on this question is, where do we want to fall on that and why? And one of the things that we've learned is that when you're talking a device that you carry around with you all the time, there are more harms associated with that device than there are with a computer, for example. So I made Midjourney. I'm running the company and I'm using a Wise phone. And the way I do that is I go and anytime I need to, I sit down and I open up my computer and I get anything. I mean, email, I get it done on my computer. And there's actually a little bit of an inconvenience hurdle there. Like I have to be intentional to open up my computer. And that intentional habit means I have to step into work mode instead of work following me 24/7 around in my pocket. And so philosophically, we actually do appreciate and like and want like what I would call light inconvenience hurdles to productive work on certain categories. And we don't want it available all the time. So may disagree, but that's kind of where we're leaning on that.
Great. Thanks. And Jack, what's your question?
You kind of touched on this, and it's almost like an identity crisis of where do you want to, where do you want to draw the line, and what do you want this phone to be? But I mean, I'm just thinking about certain, call them lifestyle apps, so like Park ATX, for example.
Yep.
And I assume I would not be able to download apps from, Google Play or the App Store here. And that creates, a minor inconvenience. But another one like Mile IQ, I use to track my mileage. My Fitness Pal is very big. How do you kind of navigate that? And is there just a plan to create kind of copycat apps of these large lifestyle apps, or
Yeah, great
maybe
question.
you can comment on that.
No, great question. And that's actually exactly what we mean when we say healthy phone. That's the heart. What you asked is literally the heart of that question. And so what we're doing is, just to give you a quick context, we're bifurcating because what between what we call practical tools, or you called them lifestyle apps, and what we call distractions. Or so categorically, we're not having social media in general, games, pornography, a handful of other things like that. But we are going to allow two-factor authentication, parking apps. Mile IQ would be a great example. These are practical tools that don't suck you into them. You don't spend hours looking at your parking app. You just use it and you're done. And so we kind of categorically, we have a rating algorithm of how healthy is this for you or not, and we draw a line at one point and we cut off. And we're starting on the conservative side of that, but we're actually using those third-party tools on our own Play Store. So we would be using the exact Park IQ app on our tool drawer is what we're calling it. So
Fantastic.
Great. Well, we're at the end of our time here. Thanks, Chris, for a great presentation. And with that, we'll move to our final presenter here, Lucas of Tensor Health. Lucas, if you can jump up and put your slides up, we'll kick off with our final presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you all for waiting. I'm the last presenter, so I'm sure people want to move around a little bit, take a break, but I'll make this quick. I'll keep it to 7 minutes for you all. So my name is Lucas, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Tensor Health, and we are a Mayo Clinic-backed AI digital health company improving outcomes in physical medicine by gamifying the rehab process. Musculoskeletal care, folks, in North America is broken. While 1 in 2 Americans suffer from MSK pain or injuries, there's a massive shortage of clinicians to treat patients, leading to long wait times. Clinical outcomes are poor due to low patient compliance with rehab, caused by lack of clarity and motivation in the rehab process. I was a perfect example. When I was 23 years old, I hurt my back quite badly, resulting in 2 herniated discs, and had to hobble around in pain for almost 4 years. No one could give me a clear, measurable, actionable path to recovery or ensure me that I would recover. So my co-founder and I joined forces to completely overhaul the MSK care paradigm. And together we've built a management team who are expert in quantified health, gaming, wearable technologies, go-to-market in physical medicine, and scaling and exiting health tech startups. I'm a serial entrepreneur with experience in healthcare and consumer wellness packaged goods. My co-founder Gautam led and scaled product development at a Class 3 medical device startup through their pre-seed, seed, Series A, and IDE approval through FDA's Breakthrough Devices program. And our Chief Commercialization Officer, Gabriel Grigo, a veteran in PM&R, over 25 years of go-to-market expertise, taking physical medicine products like Tensor from launch to 100 million in annual revenue at companies like PowerBar, Game Ready, and AlterG. Game Ready and AlterG are the best known brands in PM&R. Any physiatrist, therapist, and surgeon would know those products: anti-gravity treadmill and a cold compression system. And then Torsten Kanash is our lead angel investor and board member. He's executive officer at AstraZeneca Japan and leads their commercial operations, digital health, and innovation teams. We also have a fantastic commercial advisory board composed of investor advisors with expertise in health policy, remote monitoring, payers, and retail health. So our big insight is turning the recovery journey into a clearly defined, engaging, multi-level game, providing patients with the motivation and certainty to complete therapy effectively. So why gamification? Well, in a game, a client has a clear map to accomplish their goals, knows exactly where they are in the journey and what to do next, is immediately engaged. The present challenge is suited for their skill level, or mobility level in this case. They see the instant reward of the work put in, And gamification also helps provide a sense of community and fun competition, in effect counteracting the loneliness people can feel when dealing with these issues. And by doing that, we empower healthcare providers to extend care outside the clinic to improve outcomes and help manage their busy caseloads. Hopefully this video renders in a second. Give it a minute. And our patented medical sensors engage patients by measuring recovery status, turning exercises themselves into games, and dynamically creating and communicating the shortest AI-driven recovery pathway for each patient. And this gives therapists objective data on the recovery status, allowing them to adjust treatment and flag patients when requiring further intervention. And guess what? By doing this, clinics can actually generate additional reimbursement revenue. So a triple win across the board. So over 150 million people in the US suffer from MSK injuries, so it's a massive market. But within that is a rapidly expanding market opportunity. As of last year, Medicare and private payers are reimbursing providers for providing remote therapy monitoring using solutions like Fenzer. And so we have a beachhead focus on the highly consolidated hand therapy market for remote therapeutic monitoring, RTM for short. So think of conditions like carpal tunnel syndrome, wrist fractures and sprains, tennis and golfer's elbow. I know one is some tennis and golfers, one of you, I believe, it might be Jose, and spasticity due to stroke or spinal cord injury. So those are the folks we're helping today. Now, when it comes to the business model, it's a B2B SaaS. Every clinic added generates $14,000 of revenue per month with 86% gross margin. And the reason that clinics adopt us is first, they get additional $29,000 of monthly revenue, which can amount to 15 to 20% additional revenue per patient per month for them. And secondly, we reduce their wait time and improve outcomes for them. So overall, they become more competitive in the market. Now, customer acquisition is scalable because once we're in, we're in. It's really hard to disrupt products that have been adopted by clinics and integrated into their clinical and billing workflow. And secondly, there's a lot of room to increase contract value. The 14K is purely based on the hand therapy population and will grow substantially as we address the rest of their patients. So knee patients, ankle patients, shoulder patients, and back patients. And thirdly, yes, there's a hardware involved, but the hardware is reused. And as a result of reusing that hardware, we get an 86% gross margin kind of business. So from a traction perspective, we are now, we have successfully transitioned from pilot to signed commercial contracts with multiple accounts generating revenue. We have a fully developed and operational FDA-listed medical device. We have seamlessly integrated into the clinical workflow of over a dozen clinics. And we've proven that Fenzer patients are more than 2 times more compliant with rehab compared to industry standard. And more importantly, we've proven the ROI for clinics by demonstrating an increase of 15 to 20% of additional revenue per patient. And we've done all of this with proprietary tech stack that is defensible and protected by a granted US patent. And we have really massive growth potential. We are in active pilots transitioning to paid contracts at large hospitals, including Mayo Clinic, UCSF, and Cedars-Sinai. But to keep up with this momentum and be at so many clinics and at the top institutions of the country, we're raising a quick $750K. 75% of that has already been spoken for. It's a convertible note with a very attractive value cap, $7.5 million, 20% discount, 5% interest. And the use of proceeds really is increasing sale volume and scaling operations. So with that, I invite you all to join our journey to level up the recovery experience for us and future generations. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucas. Jack, what's your first question?
Yeah, so Lucas, you almost beat me to it with talking about how sticky these software applications are for, I guess, software hardware applications are for clinics. But could you speak to how difficult it has been to get in and replace whatever the incumbent is? Granted, it's a less technical product and it's going down to an occupational therapist, right? So can you talk about what the hurdles have been in getting into clinics?
Yes, for sure. There's quite a few. Happy to share. So the what keeps me up at night, or our status quo kind of competition, is the list of exercises that are printed on a piece of paper, right? And a guesswork and self-reporting. That's what we are disrupting in many ways. About 80% of the market still provides patients with a printed piece of paper that no one looks at, get lost, right? But it's very easy to print a piece of paper and write some instructions on it, right? So that's kind of the bar. That's how easy we have to be used. So, so that's kind of my first part of the answer. Two is, there's really two key things you need to figure out. You need to really understand the clinical workflow at each clinic. There's more or less 3 to 4 models that are used across the board. And what I mean by that is, are there assistants? Are they using assistants? Are they using aides? Are they using athletic trainers in conjunction with PTs and OTs? And how, when you get to the clinic, how do you arrive? Are you greeted by the therapist or are you greeted by an aide? And all of this matters, and you have to kind of map out that workflow in every clinic, what that process looks like, because you're gonna, introduce Tensor into that system, you're gonna add friction, and you need to make sure you create more value than the friction added into the system. And so what we've done is we've spent a significant amount of time monitoring those workflows, mapping them out, and really understanding what is the best way for Tensor to be introduced to the patient during the first rehab session, and when and at what time during that rehab session. So really mapping that out, and then, informing the clinic, this is the best way to do it, that reduces amount of friction added and won't disrupt you or limited disruption to existing workflow. And I would say the majority of our competitors fail at that. And we have just spent a significant amount of time. We've had a breakthrough over the summer where now we're starting to sign. We just signed our second contract. We signed our first contract in August, and we've already proven out billing. So that's one. Two is understanding the reimbursement. How will the clinic, yes, you can improve outcomes. Yes, you can improve patient experience. All that's great. No one cares. How are you going to make me money? And so you really have to understand how they do their billing. So sorry to go into details, but do they use third-party billers, or do they have billing in-house? And then how is their billing system connected to their EMR? And are the RTM codes, that's the care paradigm we fall under, are they introduced in the program already? And what are the encounters involved in that? And what kind of documentation is required? And what we've done on the product side is we've automated all of that for the therapists. So they love it. So we automate all the documentation. We inform them when the codes are ready to be billed, and we provide them with a package, and all they have to do is submit that to their billing people, and it's taken care of. And so now we have companies reaching out to us who have learned that we have this kind of back-end automation and want to partner with us because we kind of figured that out. So so we're actually building out, it's pretty much what's happening now is we're building it out as a platform, and we have other sensor companies reaching out because we figured out how to engage the patient via gamification, and also how to seamlessly integrate into existing clinical workflow.
I love it. I can't
Thanks
tell
for that
you
question.
how many companies we've passed on because they don't have the billing portion of things figured out. It's just an insurmountable hurdle to get past.
It
So
is.
thank you.
It is. Yeah. No, my pleasure.
Great. Thanks, Jack. And Jose, what's your question?
I would be your ideal client because I play golf and tennis, and I have both the issues in both arms, and it kind of goes through there. So if you talked about being an easy product, so have you thought about moving this or opening the retail side, the B2C side? So anyone like me, who I'm very lazy to go to the hospital, or I don't like hospitals or clinics.
Yeah.
If I can buy this in Amazon and just do it myself, probably I would do it, and the market would be much larger. What do you think about that?
Yeah, love it. And I have a perfect slide for it, but I can't pull it up right now in this current version of the deck. So I'm going to describe it to you. So our goal is I was going to show you our 3-year go-to-market roadmap. And in 2025, we anticipate upregulating, become a digital therapeutic and available over the counter. And that's going to have to happen anyways, because there's just so much pressure and so much demand for physical therapy in many ways across the board, and it's getting worse every day. So going back to your comment, we're starting in the clinic, but our goal is to be available in clinic via CVS or Walgreens, or via Amazon, or your payer or your benefits provider can do a Tensor kit. You get injured, I was going to also show you our patient journey for 2025. You get injured, we're synonymous with physical therapy to a greater extent, or with pain reduction. You do an intake form, you connect it to a provider. We meet you where you need to be met. So, we make sure that our sensors, if needed, if sensors are needed for your condition, then we make sure that you get those delivered to your home or picked up at the most most convenient way. You then provide it with their care plan in a gamified manner, and you have, it's based on your condition, your diagnosis, and based on all the data we've collected to date, we will create an optimal recovery journey for you, which will be a combination of in-person clinic visits and digital visits, a combination of both to optimize that recovery outcome for you. And with our AI support on the back end, we will make sure you stay on track, you don't fall, you don't drop out, and you reach to full recovery. So that is the blue vision. We want to get there, and the reality is we have to, because right now the wait time for PT is about 6 weeks across the board in the United States, and it's getting worse. And every week you wait to start your rehab adds an additional 4 weeks to your recovery journey. So you really do not want to wait, right? And so and again, so why are we waiting till 2025 is because there's no data right now. With our sensors, we're finally collecting what that optimal recovery journey looks like, and therefore we're codifying that recovery journey. And there are protocols out there, but they were developed in the 80s with a bunch of KOLs with no evidence. But they're still called evidence-based practice because it's a KOL that made it. But it's not actually how many reps of exercise should you do this week compared to next week? How much should your range of motion improve between week 1 and week 4? That's the data we're collecting, and that will finally give us an optimal recovery journey for every condition. And so the only way to do that is to codify what the therapists think and get patients to be using it. And that allows us to upregulate to a direct-to-consumer offering in the future.
Thank you. Very clear.
Great.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks, Lucas. We're at the end of our time now. Thanks so much for a great presentation. With that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining today. This concludes the main portion of our event. We will have breakout sessions here in a moment. For those who want to follow up with any of these speakers, you'll find them in the breakout rooms. And I want to thank Jose Luis Silva for his participation today, and looking forward to his presentation in the next event. And then Jack Whelan of International Accelerator, thank you for telling us more about the group you have there and all the wonderful things you're doing, and for participating on the panel as well.